Welcome to Leading with Curiosity. Command and control leadership is dead. We interview leaders, entrepreneurs, and executive coaches challenging old paradigms and fostering cutting-edge leadership. Here's your host, certified executive coach, Nate Leslie.
Hey listeners, my guest today is the experienced co-founder and CEO of Skratch Labs, an active lifestyle nutrition company based in Boulder, Colorado. Ian McGregor is a believer in conscious leadership and the power of teams. He's also a two-time national champion cyclist and a trained mechanical engineer. Ian, welcome to Leading with Curiosity.
Thanks, Nate. Happy to be here.
Hey, in the pre-interview, I didn't mention this, but I did research that you, like our friend Dan and Campminder, were rated as Outside Magazine's one of the best places to work. Is that right?
That is correct. And, I think for us, the first time we applied and, we're selected last year in the midst of COVID, brought a lot of pride. I think not only for myself, but across our entire company that we were able to, to come together in obviously such a difficult time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so when you think about that recognition, what are the couple of things that you're doing at Skratch Labs that come to mind as, yeah, this is pretty cool?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that, the cause and effect mechanisms for something like that probably aren't perfectly known, right? Because if they were, everyone would just, put them in and repeat them and we'd all be there together. And that's probably not the case for business as a whole. But I think for us at Skratch, there's a few things that we believe in. The first is that, investing in your team is a positive reinforcing feedback loop, but only if you give it enough time to come to fruition. And, we've done a few things. We've established a living wage floor where no matter what position someone's at, when they come in at an entry level, we pay them a wage that we calculate to be one that would enable them to, to have a life outside of work. And, obviously that raises the floor for everybody, but that also artificially lowers the ceiling for some. And, that's a decision that we've made and really stood behind. I think the other big piece is, we've got a clear vision about who we are, what we're trying to do, and a truly well-defined and real set of core values. And, not a set of core values that's on a coffee mug that people look at and joke about, but a real set, that, means that some of my best friends in the world couldn't work at Skratch. And that's not to say that we're right and they're wrong, but it is to say that, we've defined how we're going to act and that we stand behind it.
Man, I love that. Some of my best friends couldn't work here. That's really cool. And I can tell that means a lot to you. Which of those values jump out for you in this moment that you'd want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, ours are a little nuanced and they take some time, but there's two that are directly opposing that I think are awesome. And the first is that we are real and we expect that our team, our people are going to wear their individuality with pride and they're going to say what they really mean. And another core value of ours is that we are empathetic. And for us, that's really about, acting with patience and generosity and understanding how your actions impact those around you. And, on the surface, obviously saying what you really mean, could really turn people off. And we expect our people to be able to do both, to speak their mind, but do so in a manner that is respectful and that takes into consideration how those words and those beliefs are going to impact other people.
Right. Yeah, that's a good balance, right? Between saying what's on your mind in a way that is respectful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just wearing your heart on your sleeve is not useful if you're just crushing people as you walk down the hall.
Yeah, it's funny. We cook a lot together at the office, and we have literally in our company's history taken a pig butchering class, and I think we've got at least 4 or 5 vegans who work for us. And being able to bring those two extremes together, right, into a team environment, I think really can create emergence. But it's not easy.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about just give it some context. You guys are in Boulder. What kind of give us some setup as to what the company's up to and what type of teams you're leading?
Yeah, absolutely. So Skratch Labs, was founded sort of softly, right? There wasn't like a day, but, in sort of 2010, 2011, 2012 timeframe. And, there's a few of us that came out of the world of professional cycling. And, where we started was naturally with cycling, and sort of solving some of the sports nutrition problems that existed. But I think what we've done is take a little bit of a back to basics approach. So for example, in our product set, you'll find 3 cookbooks. And a cookbook that on the surface could be competing with the products that we also sell to people. And where we've really landed is recognizing and believing in that there's a time for convenience where you've got to buy something in a package, and there's a time for technology, right, that can really help solve sports nutrition problems. But there's also a place for back to basics, right? There's a place for simplicity. There's a place for from scratch cooking. And, a great example is, we operated a food truck all across the country, not in Canada, in the US, for 6 or 7 years, and, served food to athletes, served food to people. And that was a big part and is a big part of our story and journey. So, it's more than just, prepackaged products.
Well, that's cool. And when I was doing my research, that really jumped out because as a former professional athlete myself, when I think about now, knowing what I know now, when I think about performance food, I think about, and then I compare that to like a whole foods or real foods diet. They contradict themselves. One's like, it can be the things that can be pushed towards an athlete, right out of a science lab, which doesn't gel with my understanding of the importance of a whole foods diet. And I feel like you're kind of mixing the two, even how your company was founded, right? That it was I read the story on your site, like diluting Gatorade, which we all did as athletes that knew there was way too much crap and sugar in it, and it sort of grew from there. Is that kind of the early days of it?
Yeah, I think that's a simplified version. And the part that I think is missing from so many people's perspectives on food is we want to simplify things. We want to put things in a binary category, good and bad. And I believe, and my own experience, and I'd be curious if this, fits with yours as an athlete as well, is there's a third component there. And that third component is really challenging to incorporate. And it's about content. And a great example of that is, what if you sit on the couch and you eat something with a lot of sugar, like, again, extreme for a moment, but you're going to push yourself towards diabetes, and you might kill yourself. The flip side of that is when you're out there, on the ice or on the ski slopes or on your bike or running or whatever you might be doing, if you're pushing yourself to your maximum, it is very well established that the single most performance enhancing substance out there is not any sort of drug. It's, simple carbohydrates. And, there's some amazing research happening right now. In fact, there's a startup business, called Super Sapiens that is using continuous blood glucose monitors to monitor the blood sugar levels of athletes during athletics. And in short, what they're finding is that people are under fueling. And it's not that you need to be eating sugar off the bike or off the ice, but when you're on the ice, right, that context has changed. And now, the idea of a diet that is good or bad, or foods that are good or bad, kind of goes out the window. That's a complex story, and it's hard for people to get their head around.
Yeah, fair. No, nice explanation of that. Yeah. I can tell we've just met half an hour ago, and I was introduced to you by previous episodes, Dan Koenigsberg from Camp Minder, also based in Boulder.
Yeah.
And I said, who do I need to interview? And he said, Ian McGregor.
Well, I guess I owe Dan a beer, so.
What is it that I love threading episodes together? What is it that you and Dan share that would make him say that?
Yeah, I think a few things. Dan and I think we both are genuinely curious, and I think we're both genuinely obsessed with trying to get better. And, this idea of, 1% better every day, like whatever cliche you want to bring to it. But, life is a long journey. And I don't think that we can expect perfection from ourselves now or ever. But if every day and every moment, every person you meet, you can see it as an opportunity of what can I learn here? It becomes pretty amazing what can happen over a period of time. And, I'm excited to see what can happen over a lifetime, maybe arrogantly, right? Like, I hope so.
Right on, and I think Dan said, you're going to like them too, Nate. And, this is Leading with Curiosity is the name of the podcast. It's it's a play on words. It's, we need to do that first. Like, what happens if citizens of the world start a conversation from a curious perspective. And
Yeah.
as leaders, what if that's a driving value in what we do? So I'm picking up what you're laying down. Let's get back to the leadership side. What connections do you make between your national level or international level cycling experience, sport,
Yeah.
and leadership? Where do they intersect for you?
Yeah, a couple things jump out in that world for me. I think first and foremost, as somebody who my entire life, as long as I can remember, relative to my age, was competing at a high level of athletics. So for me, it began with ski racing, transitioned into cycling. Coaching was expected. Coaching was natural.
Yeah.
Coaching and getting feedback and critique was something that I valued, something that was normal in my life. And I'll tell you that as I transitioned, into the quote unquote real world of business, I was surprised and personally disappointed that coaching and feedback was not expected, was not universal. And I think that's a shame. I think that if we can get our egos out of the way, and we can listen with curiosity to what somebody has to say, we don't have to believe all of it, right? It's not all necessarily true. It's all respective. It's from their story, through their lenses, et cetera, et cetera. But it is a perspective. And as many of those as we can gather about ourselves, about our behaviors, about our teams, our businesses, our worlds, our families, whatever it might be, I don't know. I see that as a data point, and I see that data as valuable to help create a better picture and hopefully, drive improvement.
Right on. And I can see you bring a great energy, and I just have a hunch you bring it to Skratch as well, and not just this call, and to your life of curiosity and pursuit and leadership. What else kind of surprised you about the real world, as we call it, once we're out of sport?
Yeah.
And leadership as it pertains to your role as CEO of a growing company?
Yeah, I think there's two things that I think are worth sharing. So the first, and I obviously can't speak for all sports or all, teams, but I was always surprised in cycling how it is a team sport, and it really requires teamwork for individual success, and yet how the incentives of the teams and organizations themselves pit the riders against each other. Now, it's not directly, it's indirectly. But I can tell you firsthand, as somebody, who eventually did not have a contract renewed, that as you get towards the tail end of a single season and, you're looking for some individual results, that there's a conflict of interest when it comes to supporting the team or supporting yourself. And I didn't know this at the time, but recognizing the opportunity to shape an organization, to change and challenge the structures and incentives that exist in business, I wish that could happen in sport. So that's one. The second thing I would say, though, is a little bit the opposite. I have been blown away, absolutely blown away, at the amount of community support that exists in business. And, where I live up in the mountains, but, our business is based in Boulder, and that's very much the business community. People that are there to help each other, and people who should, quote unquote, be competitors are actually one another's greatest cheerleaders. And that is a wonderful surprise. And I can tell you with absolute confidence that, Skratch Labs would not be what it is today if it were not for, the supportive communities of the natural foods industry, the outdoor industry, and, amazing people who are just willing to help.
Yeah. That's that, I think agglomeration economy, an economist student would call it, like, car sales lots are all next to each other so that people can come and experience this whole thing. And foundation of this podcast, interviewing not only leaders who believe in coaching, but coaches themselves who one could argue are competitors. Like, hang on, the more people who know about this awesome space, the better we all are. And what a great way to go to bed at night and get up in the morning, knowing that like your competitors are challenging you to be better and giving you ideas and insight and supporting one another. That's a great position to lead from every day, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think not only is it a great position to lead from, but I think it's a great position to be in, right? And benefit from, and be able to give back to. So I think that all becomes, again, just a positive feedback loop, right? That can drive everything forward. And, ultimately all ships rise with the tide.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. You mentioned athletes and some incentive processes pitting people against each other. We talk about this all the time as it comes to like annual performance reviews.
Yeah.
Large organizations have talked to people who say our organization takes pride in hiring the best people out there. We've got the best. Mm-hmm. And then they have a performance review cycle where it's a bell curve and they can only give a certain number of people the 9 or 10 out of 10. So they have to quote unquote fail other people. So, okay, we've hired you. You're the best. We got the best talent here. Yeah. And by the way, you're not meeting expectations because we're only allowed to pass like 30% of the people. So tell me about your performance conversations and performance reviews and, connection with your humans doing the important work at Skratch.
Yeah. So I have two quick responses for that, if you'll, bear with me.
Please.
So the first, which is not directly connected to Skratch. So, I'm in graduate school right now at MIT, and I'm in Cambridge, sitting in a hotel room. I have class tomorrow.
Wow.
And that exact challenge has arisen there. So you've got a cohort of 100 students who are all, used to being the best of the best, and they put it on a bell curve and they force it there. And that means, you can get a 94 and end up with a C, or you could get a, 72 and end up with an A. And it's been really fun to not only participate in that, but watch that challenge and watch people be challenged in that environment. So it's not, it's not stuck just in business. One thing with Skratch that we do, we're not forcing a bell curve when it comes to raises. And in particular, we've got a profit sharing program in place, and it's based on 2 metrics. It's based on our growth versus our goals, and it's based on our profitability versus our goals, which are massive oversimplifications, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're getting graded on an extrinsic result when what we're really trying to, get people to do is do the right intrinsic behavior. So that itself is inherently broken. Mm-hmm. But what it does do is tie the entire team together. Yeah. And whether it's somebody on our team who has the ability to directly control revenue with a key sales contract, or whether it's making sure that we don't use too much tape, but also enough tape that the box doesn't open on every package that we send out, right? We all directly have a hand in what we're doing together. And when we can share collectively in our success, I hope and believe that in conjunction with, core values and an agreed set of behaviors and beliefs, that we can all march in the same direction and, be successful together. It's not perfect. And, hopefully you can, as the organization grows and, complexity increases, there's probably going to be a need for evolution. Yeah. So I don't know what the answers are in the future, but that's what we've got for now.
I just wrote transparency on my sheet here. Like that takes a large amount of honesty and transparency and encouragement to recognize growth, the increase in sales, and also all the things that go along with that. And everyone has a role to play, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the pre-interview, I asked you about your unique angle on leadership, and I chose intentionally not to dig into the answer pre-interview after I was doing my research. Yeah. Rational hedonism. Teach me, Ian. Teach me.
Yeah. Well, let me answer that with this. Our business, right? The name is Skratch Labs. And, those are 2 potentially opposing ideas, right? That, things are better when made from scratch. That no matter where you are in life, it's never too late to start from scratch, right? And contrast that to something like a lab or a laboratory where we talk about reductionism, right? Where we as scientists like to take apart an apple, break that apple down into the chemical components that it's made up of, and try and identify the one in there that's good for you. And it's not that one is right or one is wrong, but really the idea of creating emergence out of those 2 extremes, right? And there's a word in science and practice known as praxis around this. And, my understanding, which could be incorrect, but of that definition, right? It's the intersection between those two worlds, right? The real world and lab, and what works best in practice. But I think in many ways, that's what rational hedonism about, right? It's about recognizing that we, as humans, both have incredible capacity for intellect and logic and reasoning and data quantification, but that there's also a component of us that has got to think with our hearts, right? And that has got to think with our guts and has got to follow that side of things. So I don't know. I believe it's not one or the other. It's not about extremism, but really about emergence of both.
Yeah. That's about the 3rd or 4th time that in our short time together, opposing ideas have both been useful.
Yeah.
And it takes an open-minded leader to recognize it's often a yes and, not a yes but. There's these both things are real. Gosh, wouldn't my country has its own challenges, but yours does too. The polarization, like what if both sides had value? What is that? That looks like together is a New York City subway car, because everyone is just living their own life and doing it together. And it's the diversity, right?
Yeah. I'll say this back to you. Both sides do have value.
Yeah.
It's about finding that value. It's about looking for those qualities, those emergence, right? It's acknowledging and understanding, not that I'm anywhere capable of this, right? But where people are coming from, why they're behaving the way they're behaving, as opposed to identifying or judging, behavior as right or wrong.
I heard this the other day in a conflict resolution course, that when someone has a really opposing view, one of the, like in a mediation concept, one of the most powerful things you can do is help them be absolutely crystal clear and articulate on their position. Normally we hear a position that's different and we just confront it with a hammer, or we run the other way. But by creating space to let them actually articulate so perfectly their position, one of two things probably happens. Some irrational thought comes out if it's a really extreme view, and maybe they catch themselves being like, okay, maybe there's a new way to think about this. And there's a highly likely chance that they will give you some version of that in return, that you've been respectful enough to hear every last crystal clear word that they have about that, their position, that they're willing to give you yours. Where might something like that come up in your culture that you mentioned right off the hop here about, being true, being authentic, being empathetic?
Yeah. I think what you just said, I love. I mean, that lands with me, right? It resonates. A piece that we coach ourselves, coach our teammates at Skratch on all the time. And this is not original thinking of mine by any stretch, but that we often don't listen to understand. We listen to figure out how we're going to reply or disagree. And if we can switch our mindset to one of being right, or away from one of needing to be right or argue or sound the smartest or sound the best, to one of first and foremost trying to understand, it totally shifts the conversation. And I think, the framework you just shared, totally fits. And I think that's sort of a next step, right? Of listening to understand first and foremost.
Yeah. Two things for me just came up there. One, like the temperature drops from Colorado summer where you can't even put your feet on the concrete in that room, to, okay, this is hot, but we can stand here and we can manage it while we explore it further. And my whole training and executive coaching around asking questions without the bias of needing to be right or have an expected answer, right? Letting go of the attachment of being right. So in that honesty culture you're talking about, it's like, okay, if you're going to ask the question, be prepared for any answer.
Absolutely. Well. Nate, that brings something up for me, and, feel free to redirect me if this is not where you want this to go, but
I'm having a good time. We'll go here. I'm having a good time.
Awesome. In sport, all sports I've ever seen, and, maybe somebody has a different experience, but all sports I've ever seen, there's performance time and there's learning time. And yet somehow in business and in life, even in school, even in academics, things have shaped their way to where it's always about performance. And, bringing back into it school for a moment, we like to think it's about learning until we get grades, and until those grades matter, and until those grades predicate what you can do next. And if we're always in performance zone, how do we expect to get better? And, I think there's a lot of research, and there's some great coaching, that's come out, and I don't know his name. I'm going to butcher his last name, but, Eduardo Brincione has a TED talk, on sort of the, performance zone, learning zone. Elsbeth Johnson has some wonderful frameworks there, but like, it's interesting how in business, we don't have that freedom to fail oftentimes.
We teach in a course that there is no expert, there's just people in practice.
Yeah.
It's a leader's discipline with the Roy Group out of Victoria. And that when you're leading, you often feel like it's game day. So you got to be right. You got to make the decision.
Yeah.
In cycling, in hockey, got football, 1 game a week, right? You practice, then you perform.
Yep.
And so how as leaders can we give ourselves permission and give our team permission to be in learning or practice mode more often?
Agreed. Yep.
And that doing the work and leading the work. I didn't mean to do that hierarchy. I didn't mean to go. I just did like a traditional org chart with my fingers there by accident. But it's like doing the work, you're a cyclist, and then leading, suddenly you're a hockey player. It's like it's 2 different sports.
Yeah.
And so how can we help a cyclist become a hockey player?
Absolutely.
In that journey, right? And it's only in the learning phase, because I mean, there's paralysis, there's anxiety, there's all sorts of things that come along with that other pressure.
There's one analogy that I use all the time with our team at Skratch, and ask some questions if this doesn't land or make sense, because we're totally weird and quirky, right? But we talk all the time about our business, our team as a ship, right, on the water, and that ship is moving around, and every day we've got the whole team empowered to be making decisions, right? And when it's clear where we're all trying to go, people can own their worlds and make their own decisions. And we need people to make those decisions and not ask for permission or not ask what to do, but just decide. And we talk about it all the time, that if you make a wrong decision, a little miniature explosion happens. And there's a water line, right? And if an explosion happens above the water, what happens? Not much, right? Like put the fire out, no big deal. Obviously, there are explosions that can happen below the water line. And those are the ones where we got to slow down. Those are the ones where we've got to ask for help, where we've got to ask for advice, where we've got to listen to other people, right? And obviously, there's judgment. Where's the water line? And of course, I don't have a magical formula for that, right? But when we can coach and empower people and really encourage them to make those decisions, even knowing that there's going to be explosions sometimes, but also help them feel supported by the fact that there's no real consequences of those explosions. That's when we can get the whole team humming. That's when we can get people moving quickly. That's when we can get people who are maybe risk averse, which is a great skill set to have, right, on your team, to continue to move things forward quickly. And it works for our company. I don't know if that makes any sense outside. There's no context, but
I have 3 other metaphors I use for that, and I'm not going to bother because that's perfect. And what happens to engagement, human experience, turnover, development, performance when you let people make decisions above the waterline? Suddenly they get better at they move towards being able to do them right at the waterline and then one day below, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's a version of the learning zone, right?
I've been making some notes here. The title of the episodes always comes out of some portion of a line, and I think, and I like to identify them like as they happen, and there's been a few, but something about the ship and the water line is coming out for me. I'm just taking a note of that. Right on. No, that's great. We're moving towards the end of our time together, and I'm just wondering, what's coming up for you around entrepreneurship and insight for people who have the same passion for learning and the excitement around team that I can clearly tell. It's probably coming through the speakers and not just the video for people that are listening. I know I know these values, they've been kind of thread through, but it was in our pre-research as well. Just something about that journey that's led you from athlete to CEO of this company with this passion that would be like a cool, unique thing that Ian McGregor would share in a podcast interview like this.
I don't know that I have a magic pearl for you. I think for some reason this is coming up in my mind, and one really interesting experience that I've had in this entrepreneurial journey is, we hired an experienced executive named Jeff Houston a few years back, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And, he was one of our first, high level, quote unquote, executive hires. And he's an incredible person, an incredible leader. And Jeff's own journey in business had started at Budweiser, right? Had moved down to only a $1.5 billion business and moved down to $150 million business. And then he found himself at this full-on startup named Skratch Labs. And he and I sat down for lunch, and I've shared this before with people because I think it's just hilarious. And it was one of these onboarding, like just what's going on questions, big list kind of things. And he got real serious, and he put his hands out on the table. He looked across and he said, Ian, before we get going, I have to tell you that I've realized that this is the riskiest thing I have ever done in my entire life. And I started laughing, like a genuine belly laugh. And what I shared back with Jeff was that I was not challenging his truth. I was not disagreeing with him whatsoever. But for me, where the business was at in that moment, where my life was at in that moment, was the exact opposite. It was actually, ironically, paradoxically, the safest place I had ever been in my entire life. And the difference in perspective of those two extremes in the same place has just stuck with me. And as I have, tried to pay it forward and mentor and support, aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are trying to make that jump, that difference of perspective, I can't let go of it. I can't forget it. And I think it's a really powerful thing to understand how different, an entrepreneurial experience or starting a business can really be for somebody, depending on where they've come. And I think this, Nate, right? Athletics, they're precarious. Like any day, any moment, you can break your leg and it can be over. And, for me, my cycling career ended like that. And it was a vascular injury where suddenly I had 60% blood flow in my left leg. And it was over. And so, that type of risk and being comfortable with that type of risk, maybe, I don't know that I realized it at the time, right? But that was the reality. I think sort of sets you up, for an entrepreneurial journey, but not everybody has the chance, right, to come through sport like that or to sort of set themselves up in that same place. So there's a mindset shift need.
So when given the opportunity to share that one last little bit, it was again these opposing ideas, $1 billion company and the startup, and the risk aversion from both sides. And I'm gonna, which is the common theme. I'm gonna leave it there. The only other thing I'd like to know is if people wanted to learn more about Skratch Labs, what would they do?
Yeah, so skratchlabs.com. In Canada, we've got an amazing business partner up there. It's ricasport.ca. They've got an online website, which I will have to send to you because I can't remember it, which, oh my gosh, they're going to be mad at me, but you can find us in MEC, you can find us in your local bike shops, your local running stores, climbing gyms, etc.
Right on. That's awesome. The last thing, we didn't explore it too much, but I know we've talked a lot about coaching in the pre-interview, and I always want to be able to give a shout out to coaches that are doing great work out there. You mentioned someone earlier. I'd just like you to be able to give him some credit as well as we sign off, the coach that you've worked with.
Yeah, I'd love to. There's a huge list of people who have helped me, and I can't touch all of them, but right now I've been fortunate and had the opportunity to work with Rob Salafia, who lives in Cambridge, and he has pushed me to hopefully be a better version of myself. So thank you, Rob.
And thank you, Ian, for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Nate.
Thanks for listening to Leading with Curiosity. Please share, follow, and rate the show so that other leaders can make positive change in the world. Connect with Nate at nateleslie.ca. And remember, the brain behaves very differently when encouraged to think rather than told to listen.